Hi, my name is Paul Grogan and welcome to another gaming rules tutorial video. This time I'm going to be teaching you how to play Letter Jam, a 2 to 6 player cooperative word game designed by Ondra Scoopy and published in 2019 by Czech Games Edition. In Letter Jam, you and each other player is given a secret word at the start of the game, made up of a number of letter cards which are shuffled and placed face down in front of you. One by one, your cards will be placed in a stand so that the other players can see them, but not you. Using a series of clever clues, the other players will help you to try and determine what your letter is. And when you think you know, you write it on your sheet and move on to the next card. By the end of the game, you've hopefully worked out what all of your letters are, and can then rearrange them to spell a word. And if more or less all players spell a word at the end of the game, then as a group, you more or less win the game. If you want a more accurate result, the game comes with a scoring system to see how well you did. I'll first explain the setup and then we can crack on with the game. The first part of setup is for each player to be given a secret word. The rulebook recommends 5-letter words for your first game, but you can customise the difficulty of the game by changing this. If you're playing with younger players, you could play with 4-letter words, or even 3. Or, if you want more of a challenge, go with longer words. The important thing is that each player can choose their own difficulty setting. For example, you can have some players with 4-letter words and some with 5. Once each player has decided how many letters they want in their secret word, there are 2 ways to create the words. One way is to shuffle the letter cards and divide them out roughly evenly between the players. And then each player secretly looks at their letters and creates a word for the player to their right. Once you have created a word, place it face down in front of you and place the rest of the cards face down in the middle of the table. If you're struggling to make a word, pick up the cards that the other players have discarded and add these to your hand. To answer the question of what types of words are allowed, well, pretty much anything. Nouns, verbs, adjectives, place names, acronyms, whatever you want. As long as the player to your right will know what it is, then you can use it. Once everyone has a word, shuffle the cards you have and give them to the player to your right. Shuffle all the discards and place them face down as a deck in the middle of the table. And place the wild card this side up near the deck. Instead of creating words for each other, CGE are developing an app, which is not currently available at the time of creating this video, but once it is available, the app will create a series of words for you. And you use the camera on your phone to read the special codes on the cards to give everyone a secret word. Take the cards you receive and lay them out face down in a line like this. Also, take a pencil and a guessing sheet, which is folded in half to make a screen. Make sure nobody else can see the things that you'll write on your sheet, and don't look at anybody else's. Although this is a cooperative game, you're not allowed to see what other players have written on their sheet. Take a plastic stand and place your leftmost letter in the stand facing away from you, so that the letter is visible to the other players. You must never look at your own letter. Take the appropriate setup card according to the number of players in the game. This is the one for a 4-player game. Place red and green clue tokens on the indicated spaces. If you're playing with fewer than 6 players, you'll use a number of non-players to bring the number of visible cards up to 6. Give each non-player a stand along with a green token and a small stack of cards dealt from the central deck. The number of cards in each non-player stack is shown on the setup card. So for a 4-player game, one non-player has 7 cards and the other has 8. Then put the top card of each stack into its stand so that all players can see the cards. Optionally, and this is not in the rulebook, but I like to give the non-players names. So here I'm going to use Charlie and Claude. You're now ready to start the game. In each round of the game, one player will give a clue to help other players work out what their letter is. Anyone can give a clue in each round, you don't take it in turns around the table, and the same player can give clues on consecutive turns. Before anyone actually gives their clue though, all players discuss their potential clues to see who has the best one. So what is a clue? Well, what you do is look at the letters that you can see and you're trying to create a word with them. The same letter can be used multiple times, and you can also use the wild card in the middle as any letter. But if you use the wild card more than once, it must be the same letter each time you use it. For example, if these are the letters that I can see, I could spell the word spill, using the wild card as the S. To offer your clue to the other players, there are strict rules about what you can and cannot say. Here are the things that you can say. How many letters are in your word? In my case, 5. How many players it helps, but not which ones? In my case, 2. How many non-player letters are used, but not which ones? In my case, 1. and whether or not your word uses the wildcard, which in my case, it does. So, to offer my clue, I would say I have a 5-letter word that uses 2 real people, one of the non-players and the wildcard. You cannot specifically say which players are being used, nor can you say how many times you are using each player's letter. You also cannot give any hints about your clue. Even saying something like, "This is an obscure word," gives too much away. Once all players who want to offer a clue have had the chance to do so, you must decide as a group which clue you will use. At the start of the game, you probably want to use the best clue, but we'll see later in the game why this isn't always the case. So, what makes the best clue? Well, generally, the longer the word is, the better a clue it usually is. And also, using lots of players is also good, because then you're helping more people. Using the non-players can also be useful, and ideally, you would create a word that doesn't use the wildcard because it adds an element of uncertainty that makes clues harder to understand. But sometimes using it to make a really good word can be useful. Using a letter multiple times is also really good, but remember, you cannot specify that when you're presenting your offer. But if I say I have a 5-letter word using only 3 players and nothing else, then you know that some of the letters are being used more than once. Let's say for this video my 5-letter clue is the one that the group chooses to go with. The first time in the game that you give a clue, you take a red token from the flower. I'll explain these more later on. I then take the numbered tokens and spell out the word by placing these in front of the letters in order, being careful not to say any of the letters. So here I would spell out the word as follows. Although there are only 8 numbered tokens in the game, you can spell out a longer word. Just point to the letters and say, this is letter 9, letter 10, and so on. Next, each player whose letter was used writes the clue down on their guessing sheet. For example, here, if you were letter 4 and 5 in the word that I just spelled out, you would write down an asterisk in position 1 for the wildcard, a P in position 2, an I in position 3, and a question mark in positions 4 and 5. This is your letter. You should then try to work out what your letter is. At the top of your guessing sheet is a list of letters, some of which are greyed out. The greyed out letters do not occur on the cards, but you can still use the wildcard as one of them. The specific letters that are greyed out are different for the different language versions of the game. If you are not sure what your letter is, write down the various possibilities of what it could be in the small box to the right. But if you are mostly sure you know what your letter is, you should also write it down in the first white box at the bottom of your guessing sheet. These white boxes refer to your cards. Then, you place the card face down on the table. Don't put the next one in the stand just yet. If you aren't completely sure, it's up to you whether you take a risk and lock the letter in or wait for a future round. I would recommend at the start of the game only locking it in if you are 99% sure, but it's up to you. Once all players have decided whether to lock in their letter, you collect the numbered tokens and then move on to the next round. All players who locked in a letter leave the card face down and then move on to their next letter from left to right. Remember, you never see your own letter. And once you have moved on, you can never go back. But if it turns out to be wrong, there are things you can do at the end of the game to fix it. And I'll get to those later on. I mentioned earlier that the first time in the game that you give a clue, you take a red clue token. And in a game with 4 to 6 players, each player can only ever have 1 red token. Once you have a red token, every time you give a clue, you take a green token. And there's no limit to the number of these tokens that you can have. The green token at the centre of the flower is special. It can only be taken once all of the red tokens have been removed. That is, the game is encouraging all players to give at least 1 clue. If this happens, then as a group, you unlock the central green token, i.e. you get 1 extra round. In a 3-player game, you take red tokens for your first 2 clues, and in a 2-player game, you take red tokens for your first 3 clues. All the green tokens unlock once all the red tokens have been taken. And once all the tokens have been removed from the flower, the game is over. Remember that in games with fewer than 6 players, you use non-player stands so that there are always 6 letters on offer. Non-player cards are used in the same way as player cards, but remember when offering a clue, they are a separate group, i.e. you specify how many players are being used and how many non-players are being used separately. Whenever a non-player letter is used, it is discarded at the end of that round and replaced with the next one from its stack. And once the green token is revealed, move the token to the flower. As a group, you now have 1 extra round, and this is why it's useful to use the non-player letters. Once the green token has been taken, if the letter is used again, it is still discarded and then replaced with a new card from the top of the deck. Later in the game, it could happen that you have gone through all of your letters, but the other players still have some left. In this case, you place your stand in front of your cards and take a new bonus letter from the deck, being careful not to look at it. If your letter is used to make a word, you write the clue down on your sheet as normal, and then you get to guess aloud what you think your letter is. If you guess wrong, there is no penalty, just place the card on the bottom of the deck. But if you guess correctly, you place the card face up in the middle of the table on the opposite side of the deck to the wild card. Either way, if you guess, you take a new card ready for the next round. So, what does a bonus letter do once it's face up in the middle of the table? It can be used to help spell a word on a future round, but it counts as a different group for the purposes of offering a clue. So, going back to the strict rules earlier that I mentioned about what you can say and what you can't say, there's a slight change. It is still the number of letters in the word, how many players are used but not who, how many non-players are used but not which, and if the wildcard is used or not, but now there's an extra part, how many bonus letters are used but not which. If a bonus letter is used to help give a clue, it is removed at the end of that round. Any bonus letters remaining at the end of the game can be useful, so only use them if you need to. I mentioned earlier that at the start of the game you probably want to go with the best clue, which is generally the one with the most letters, using lots of players and not using the wildcard. But this is not always the case. There are other factors to take into account. Here, for example, we have 2 rounds left, and I'm only on my 3rd letter out of 5. Even if I have the best clue, like an 11-letter word using only 4 players and nothing else, I should probably not give my clue because I need people to give me clues to help me get my remaining letters. However, as a group, it's totally up to you whose offer you go with. Also, certain table talk is allowed. For example, in this situation, there can be discussion around the table such as, Paul still has 2 letters to go. We really need to include his letter in a clue. That is totally allowed until someone actually gives their offer, at which point they must follow the rules laid out earlier where you cannot specifically say which players are being used. I mentioned earlier on that the game ends once all the tokens have been removed from the flower. However, you can choose as a group to end the game early if everyone has got all of their letters and thinks they know their word. When the game ends, you should look at your sheet and try and work out what your word is. And at this point, you might look at your letters and think, this doesn't spell a word. So look back through your clues to try and work out what went wrong. For example, here, looking back, I realised that this letter could have been an I and not an O, which now spells a word. Write down what you think your word is in the grey boxes on your guessing sheet and then carefully rearrange your cards, keeping them face down. Some players find it useful to use the numbered tokens, placing them above their original cards before rearranging them. If you're not sure what your word is, any of the bonus letters in the middle of the table can be taken and placed over the top of one of your cards. Each bonus letter may only be taken by one player, and someone can also take the wild card, which they can use as any letter. For example, here the game ended before I was able to work out what my 5th letter was, and assuming I have my other letters correct, this could be one of a few things. My safest bet would be to take the P bonus letter, assuming nobody else needed it, place it over my last card, and then spell the word plate. You can also take a bonus letter or wildcard to spell a longer word if you want to. So I could take the wildcard, add it onto the end as an S, and now spell plates. Once everyone has rearranged their letters, it's time for the big reveal. One by one, players should reveal their letters from left to right. And as long as it spells a word, it counts. Even if it wasn't the original word that you were given, it just needs to be a word. If more or less everyone spells a word, then you all more or less win. And if everyone managed to spell a word, then it's time to celebrate in style. The scoring is purely optional. You can just play the game and enjoy it, but if you want to work out how well you really did, count up your scores. Each player who got a word earns the group 3 points per letter in the length of the original word. So here, I got 15 points. You get 1 point per letter beyond the original length, so I get an extra 1 for making the word longer. Incorrect words still score 1 point for each letter guessed correctly. So here, you got 3 of the letters correct, the R, the O and the W, so that's 3 points. And then you get 1 point for each green token still available on the flower for each player who correctly spelled a word. Once you have your score, flip the flower over to see how well you did. And that is how you play Letter Jam. I hope you found this video useful in learning how to play the game, and if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. For more of my videos, including some playthrough videos, please subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to click the little bell so that you'll be notified about any new videos. Thanks again to CGE for sponsoring this video, and to all of my Patreon supporters who help support the channel. Until next time, take care, and thanks for watching. Gaming Rules is proudly sponsored by Game Toppers, upgrading your gaming experience. Visit GameToppersLLC.com.